We will go forward.
The Atlantic Charter already contains the sketch for our future blueprint of security, and our rich and bitter experience will enable us to complete the picture. The conquest of vital bases for the attack on Hitler's fortress of Europe, the knockout of a great European power, the coming over of the powerful Italian Navy to us, all this has followed from our successful Mediterranean strategy. And by the coming winter, we shall have closed in upon Hitler's central fortress of Europe and be making our dispositions for the grand assault by all arms next year. That assault will be our first priority. And while it goes on, we shall be increasing our pressure in the Far East and taking all preparatory steps for the assault upon Japan, which is our second priority. And I feel deeply grateful to all of you for this great welcome with which you honor me. When I was in London last year, I much regretted that no opportunity was found for a visit to the city, and I am therefore all the more pleased to be able to be with you here today and to enjoy your hospitality. My Lord Mayor, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you most warmly, my Lord Mayor, for your most kind, your all too kind words of welcome to me here today. I may say that I am very happy to be with you here today. I come to you on this visit a much happier man than on my visit last year, and for this I have very good reasons. I have approved of the war policy and affirmed their determination to see it through to the end with all their strength. But they have done more. They have also affirmed their continuing membership of our worldwide Commonwealth for the future, and have once more expressed their firm resolve to stick to their old and tried friends and to shun the pitfalls of neutrality and isolation in this dangerous era through which the world is passing. I need not point out to you the significance of all this. It makes me feel easier about the future than I have felt for a long time. Taking it all round, I think we shall not be far wrong if we look upon this election as one of the major victories of the war. The local situations in the dominions have called for elections there. In this country, in Great Britain, no such situation exists. No election is needed to prove that the British people are united to a man behind the greatest leader they have ever had. The leader of whom it is now amusing to recall, a gentleman prominent in your public life, told me only a couple of years before this war that he had no party, no followers, and no hope of future leadership. Such are the ironies of history. I reminded my informant that in the later stages of the last war, I had heard from a well-known diplomat exactly the same statement about Clemenceau the Tiger, and that within a month thereafter he was Prime Minister of France and led his country to final victory in the war. You have found a greater than Clemenceau, and he will lead you to a more conclusive and fruitful victory than that of the last war. Autumn of last year was the lowest ebb of our fortunes. Then, at 2 points of this vast war front, things happened which transformed the whole course of the war and perhaps of history. The battles of Stalingrad and El Alamein marked the real turning points in this war and will rank in history with the other decisive battles of the world. The destruction of the German army at Stalingrad sent a shiver and a shock right through the entire German line, from end to end of Russia. And their long line has ever since been bending or reeling back, until now it rests temporarily and uneasily behind the Dnieper. The Axis debacle at El Alamein spread over the whole Italian North Africa, until now, with the British and American advance approach from the west, the Mediterranean has been cleared, Italy has been beaten out of the Axis, and the Allied forces are marching on Rome. The Italians are out, and the Germans are in retreat everywhere. The passive agony of Europe under the Nazi heel is everywhere changing over to active sabotage or guerrilla resistance. The U-boat campaign has for the moment been countered, and our shipping losses are less than at any other time in the war, though a recurrence of the menace must be expected and prepared against. The Solomons have been cleaned up, and New Guinea is in process of being cleaned up. The change within these 12 months is indeed spectacular, and it becomes all the more wonderful if compared with what the enemy had planned to achieve and was almost in sight of achieving. If the enemy had reached the Volga-Caspian line in the north and had taken Egypt in the south, and from both these points had pushed on to join hands with Japan, moving westwards from India and the Indian Ocean, what a mortal blow would have been struck at our prospects of victory. His vision of a Nazi samurai world would have been within his grasp. That was his grand design, which was shattered by the Russians at Stalingrad, by the British Commonwealth at El Alamein. There is one word more on this subject of war honors which I wish to add, and which I think in justice should be said.
and finally the Lord Mayor with the General.
Aldermen, sheriffs, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, this is an outstanding occasion. We are met to listen to one whose ability and experience make him an authority. I offer the city's most cordial welcome to its second senior living honorary freeman, a great and gallant soldier, a brilliant statesman, our respected and beloved friend, Field Marshal Smuts. About
the British Commonwealth call for no elaboration. We are now in the autumn of 1943 and shall soon be entering upon winter. Looking back now at the hopes and forecasts for 1943, those of us best able to judge entertained last year have already gone farther and achieved more than we had planned to do by next winter. Certainly my own hopes were more modest than the measure of success already achieved and still in sight before the end of this year. We have climbed out of the depths and moved far forward. We may confidently reckon on still further advances, especially in southern and southeastern Europe. The fall of Hitler in the West will have far-reaching repercussions in the Far East and will facilitate and hasten the fall of Japan thereafter. Indeed, the collapse of Germany may mark the beginning of a cataclysmic turn of events in the Far East also, and of the early ending of the war thereafter. Meanwhile, as our grand strategic reserve in the West for the final moves in the war, final war would also be the best justification for the all-important part it is likely to play in the peace, the hope, or none have such high hopes been built. One more concluding remark. It will be vain to think of the world's economic recovery unless that deeper call of humanity is answered. Our very claim to be a Christian civilization will lay the heaviest duty on us. The Good Samaritans will also be the best citizens. Whatever our reparation policy after this war will be, it will at least begin with this essential work of international relief and reclamation, on which the return of the world to better economic and social conditions will depend. Paris. On that basis alone of an unshakable determination can the future organization for security become effective. Only the will to peace can make our machinery for security function properly. So long as the essential will to peace is there, it will not be difficult to establish the machinery. Without the will, the way will not be found. In that will alone can be our peace, the peace which will lead to the consummation of all we have longed for and fought for in the struggles of our race.